Okay, so let's solve this question. It is from GATE CSE 2019 and it is question 6. It is a 2-mark question, right? So we have to reduce, and these are the statements that have been provided to us. Let's read the question. The police arrested 4 criminals, PQRS, okay? The criminals knew each other. They made the following statements. P made this statement, Q made this statement, R made this statement, and S made this statement. Okay, assuming only one of the arrested 4 committed the crime, okay, only one of the statements made above is true. These are 2 assumptions which are providing restrictions on the whole question. So they are as important as the original statements. Be very clear on that. Who committed the crime? Okay, so let's list down all the information that has been provided. So P's, there are how many, what all criminals are present? There are 4 criminals and they are P, Q, R and S. Very good. And they're telling us that only one committed crime, only one of them did crime. Okay. And only one statement, only one true teller. These are 2 very important things. Now, what are the statements claiming? They're claiming that P claims that Q committed the crime. So P is saying that Q has committed the crime. Q is saying that S has committed the crime. Okay. S has committed the crime. R is saying that I did not do it. Okay. Not R is the claim over here. And S is saying that what Q said about me is false. So Q is a liar. This is what S said, right? So right now, at first, some students may think that it is not solvable because it does not seem to make sense directly. But here is the point at which deductions come into play. When you do solid deductions based on the assumptions that has been provided over here, only one of them is possible. And I will do it so that you have confidence that it can be done. Okay. So at a time, only a single one of them could be a criminal, right? So we could consider P as a criminal, then Q as a criminal, then R as a criminal, and likewise we can do, and from that we can do reductions. And one more thing that has been told to us is that only one of them is telling the truth, right? So if I assume that P is the criminal, then out of these 4 guys saying stuff, only one of the guys must be telling the truth, and that is how you do reductions, right? If everything fits, then that is your answer. So let's assume that P is the criminal, right? At that point, if P is the criminal, then P is claiming that Q is the guy who did the crime. So this is false because P has been assumed as a criminal. So this is false. Let's write F over here, right? Q is saying that S is the criminal. This is also false. R is saying that R is not the criminal. So this is true, right? S is saying that Q is a liar. Q is saying that S is the S is the criminal and currently P is the criminal. So yes, Q is indeed a liar. So this thing is also true. So as you can see, 2 of the criminals are telling the truth over here, and the assumption that has been given to us is that only a single criminal could be telling the truth at a point, right? So P cannot be your answer. P cannot be your answer. Let's assume that Q is your criminal. If Q is your criminal, then what? At that point, P is telling that Q is the criminal. So P is, let me erase this lower part so that you don't have any confusion, right? So if Q is the criminal and P is saying that Q is the criminal, so this is P is telling the truth, right? P is telling the truth. At over here, look, R is saying that R is not the criminal, right? That is also true because we have assumed that Q is the criminal. So this is also true. So both P and R are telling the truth. And this violates the assumption that only a single criminal at a point is going to be telling the truth. So Q cannot be your criminal. Very good. Now let's assume that R is the criminal. If R is the criminal, then P is stating that Q is the criminal. So this is false. Q is stating that S is the criminal. This is also false. R is stating that R is not a criminal. So this is false because R is the criminal right now, right? S is saying that Q is a liar. Q is saying that S is the criminal, right? And that statement is Q is a liar, and that is true because right now R is the criminal and Q is stating that S is the criminal. So Q is lying, right? So what S is saying is true. So from all of those, only a single option, that is S, is saying the truth. and that meets the criteria that only one truth teller must be present inside of the four-person gang of criminals, right? So the answer over here is going to be R, right? R is the criminal over here, because that is, when we assume R to be a criminal, it meets all of the criteria that has been provided to us, right? So R is going to be your criminal, and that is option B. It was a question that requires deduction. There is no other way. People sometimes try to avoid deductions, but believe you me, as an engineer, you have to rely on deductions, because face value, whatever you see at face value, more often than not is not the truth, and that is the way the reality works, and that is the why in engineering we focus on deductions and inductive reasoning to get to answers, right? This question is a very good question that gives you confidence in deductions, and why reducing things can lead you to answers which were otherwise invisible to you, right? And I do hope that you must have been able to solve it by yourself, and I have provided only a validation to your original solution. And with that, I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.